Hi everyone, welcome to this week's session of the Google+ Platform Office Hours. This week we're joined by the Tabletop Forge team, and they're going to tell us about their experiences developing this really cool Hangout app. And we're also going to see a demo. So before we get going, I'll just introduce myself and everyone around me. I'm Jenny Murphy. I'm a developer programs engineer here at Google on the Google+ platform. And next to me,
Jonathan Berry. I'm the developer advocate for Google+ Hangout apps.
And I'm Wolf Dobson. I'm a developer program engineer on Hangout apps as well.
And then behind the camera, Shrag is helping us with audio and video stuff. It looks like he's going to come over and do a lean-in. So you know, there is someone behind the camera. Shrag. And joining us via the magic of Hangouts, we have Alan.
Hi there.
We have Charles.
Hey.
Joshua.
Hello.
And Fraser.
Hi, everybody.
Cool. Okay, so I guess we might as well get started with the demo, and we'll check out this cool app, and then we will barrage you with questions. So, Charles, I think you were going to be doing the demo screen.
Yeah, sure.
Fire it on up.
All right, let me screen share this. Okay, so can everybody see that?
Yep. So we see a map, and those of you on air may not be able to see the text, but you'll just have to trust us that there's text there too. I'll talk you through it.
So before you get into the screen share, why don't you give us a little overview of what you built?
Okay, well, so it's a little complicated. Josh and I both started building the same app, basically. And we started talking about building our app, and we started talking about how we were both doing it and talking to the community that already exists in Google+ of role-playing gamers. And every time we talked, we kind of realized that we were doing the same thing slightly different. Like, it was kind of like some sort of convergent evolution. He's making a shark and I'm making a dolphin, but we both end up looking pretty much the same. So and I can't speak for Josh, but I certainly came to the realization that there was too much here to do for just me in my spare time, because I'm a programmer full-time, and that takes up a fair chunk of my time, and I'm a dad when I'm not doing that. And so we've decided to just pool our efforts and build one app that serves the needs of the community. So we're building a role-playing game or RPG app that lets people play RPGs in the Hangouts. So I guess the most commonly known RPG is Dungeons & Dragons. It's a game in which one person creates a world, like the Lord of the Rings kind of world, and everybody plays a character in that world. Gimli or one of the elves or one of the hobbits. And so you go around and you have adventures and you do various different things that your character is able to do, and some characters are good at some things and other characters are good at other things, and you explore and you become more powerful and so on and so forth. But really what it is it's a tactical game, but it's also a shared storytelling experience. One person comes up with the overarching world and everybody else figures out how they're going to behave in that world, how they're going to interact in that world, how they're going to make themselves part of that world. So it's a really creative set of games. So RPGs are not just a game, they're a set of games. Some of them are set in our world, in an alternate version of our world, in the future, the past, in a galaxy far, far away. The most commonly known ones, like Dungeons & Dragons, are set in a medieval fantasy setting, mostly pilfered from the Lord of the Rings. There are post-apocalyptic ones and so on and so forth. So in any world you can imagine, you make some rules, you throw people into it, and then you pretend that you're walking around the world. So normally what's done for this style of game is that there is a table in between the players, or among the, around which the players gather. And sometimes there's a map, sometimes you'll have tokens to indicate, to represent yourself moving around on the map. And almost always you'll have dice, or in some cases cards, that you draw randomly to determine how well you succeed or fail doing something. So the two main components of a tabletop when you're playing are the ability to roll dice where everybody can see you roll the dice, so you can't cheat and say you got something you didn't get. And in a lot of cases, the ability to put up a map and then move around the map. In some cases, you want to put up pictures to give people a feeling of how what they see or what they're interacting with. But in any case, it comes down to an image that is in a shared environment. And so that's why Hangouts are so good for this. A lot of people have been making virtual tabletops for a lot of years, but in most of them, you can't see each other. You don't have that shared video conferencing. You have some degree of sharing the same elements, the map or the rolling of the dice. You can text each other. But in my opinion, and Josh can maybe speak to this a little more, Google Hangouts really just gives you the whole package. It gives you the ability to see everybody as if you're sitting around the same table. It gives you the ability to create a space where you can all interact with the same elements as if you're all rolling the same dice or looking at the same map. So I guess that's the starting of it. So what I put up here in the app is a map that I've uploaded that I didn't draw. I believe this one is from Fantastic Maps. Jonathan is a fantastic map drawer, and so I believe this is a chunk of his. And on the right-hand side is the window where we have rebuilt the chat function with some added functionality. So you can roll dice in the chat window. So you type /D and then you type in what dice you want to roll. I want to roll 2 6-sided dice, so I write 2d6, and I've got a bonus of +3. So I go +3, and I roll it, and I don't know if you can see it, this resolution, but I rolled a 9 out of
I love that.
12. So now I'm trying to do something, I need an 8, I roll a 9, everybody's happy, I've succeeded in doing it, and we carry on. If I rolled the dice on my desktop, I would have had to point the camera down at my desktop, or you just all have to take my word for it. And more often than not, if I really needed to make the roll, I'd just lie and tell you that.
and we have done that. We've taken a camera and joined a Hangout with an extra account, pointed a camera at the table, and I was rolling dice to show for everybody, and you can see it on the camera. But it was, this is a much more elegant solution.
And I don't know why they don't just trust me and accept that I got what I rolled.
Speaking of trust, speaking of trust, can I ask a quick technical question at this point? That die roll, is that taking place on your machine, on the DM's machine, on some central server, or where exactly did that take place, and how does everyone else trust that?
All right, so right now it does take place on the client. So theoretically, if somebody really wanted to know what they're doing and hack JavaScript files, they can mess with it. But the event syncing mechanism that sends this to the other clients to the Google State object it uses a certain formatting of the messaging that might be hard to reproduce if they didn't know what they were doing. Eventually, we are doing some stuff server-side for handling local files and stuff like that, so it wouldn't be too hard to move at least the random number generator part of that to the server, but for now, we're trusting that no one's messing around with the client.
If it's Dungeons and Dragons, you can always be like, and a rock falls out of the sky and crushes you.
Exactly. Well, this is actually a case this is an example of the kind of convergent evolution that we had, and this is why when Josh and I finally decided to put our work together, we went through this a few times trying to merge our work, but once you get under the skin, we realized that how we were doing it was quite different, and every time it just seemed too much trouble. So Josh is doing this, I believe, in JavaScript, all on the client side. What I was doing was I was posting it by JSON to an Apache server and running PHP to parse the text and to come up with the random die results, and then posting that back and to the client, and from there into the shared state, and then pushing it out to everybody else. So 2 totally different ways of doing exactly the same thing, but when it came down to integrating one with the other, it's apples and oranges.
Well, and that's part of why I asked the question, is because there are a lot of different approaches that can go with it. I wanted to know which one you guys chose and kind of your thinking behind why you chose that. And especially when you're talking games, how do you find the right comfort level between security and playability?
Right. Well, okay, so for the main mechanism of how we're actually sharing everything, first of all, is like we are using the shared state object. It does have a limit of whatever the 10K size, so we actually don't share, like, say, when you add an image there, we just share the event that player X added an image, and then in the shared state object, we share out the URL, the size of the image, the location of the image, and we essentially replay that on all the clients. So we're using the state object kind of like an event engine, and as soon as it processes that event from that person, it clears it from the state. So,
yeah, and so I guess two aspects of this are that you've got a limit of 10K in the shared state, which means you have to be very conservative about what you put in there, and you have to clean it out when you're done with it. And then the other thing is that because there's so many browsers, cross-browser compatibility becomes a real big issue, which is why I chose to go the JSON PHP route, because once you're at PHP, you're on a server that's completely separate. You know what the environment is, and it always works the same every single time. As long as you can do the JSON event and parse the results on every browser, it doesn't matter what it is that you're doing. So we're still in the process of working this out. Josh's is remarkably, the Tabletop Forge has turned out to be remarkably stable. But these are obviously questions that we're going to be asking every single time we do anything in here. And the more complex it gets, the more we're going to have to examine those things.
So I think last week you asked a similar question about security, especially about storing local config files. So in games it's interesting, right? Because no matter how smart you want to be with the JavaScript, you can always hack it. You can obfuscate it, you can encrypt it. At the end of the day, you can't trust it.
Everybody can read your files.
Everybody can read the files, and if you're doing shared state stuff, then you can kind of maybe even read the files or change people's files on their own apps, right?
Sure.
So the way the games typically do it, they actually have a server that models the entire world. So they have a state of everything stored. Every player, their values, their turns, and then when somebody wants to make a move, you request that server saying, is this a valid move? And I trust you, and then you go back and forth. So that's the more secure way of doing things.
Right.
You guys also have, especially with the dice, you have an event tracker there, and even if somebody goes in and changes your shared state, each client has a record of what's going on. So ultimately, because it's transactional that way, you can walk back up the transactions and see where somebody was cheating.
But the thing too is that I've wrestled with these, and I'm sure Josh has as well. We're trying to model reality, and in reality, you can put your finger on the die and tip it over. You can put your hand up so that people don't see what you're doing. You could move the pieces of paper back off the map so you can see in rooms that you haven't actually explored yet. At some point, it ruins the game to do that. If you're going to have people cheating, they're going to find a way to cheat anyways. And because we're not building a game system, we're building a system for a whole host of games, some of which use maps, some of which use tokens, some of which use dice, some of which use cards. The more you lock it down, the more you exclude some games and make it so it only works with other games. My personal goal is to lock it down as much as you can to ensure that what somebody does is what everybody sees, but then beyond that to leave it as loose as possible so that it works for everyone. Yeah, and then you just trust people. If the GM gets up and goes to the bathroom and comes back, he just trusts that nobody's looked at the map. Leave somebody there as a guard to watch the map.
Well, and I think that's an
you roll a 7. We trust that you haven't taken 6 hours to figure out how to reverse engineer the programming so that you always get a good roll. Right? It ruins the game for the player as much as it ruins the game for the GM.
I think that's an important point. Most of the games that we're talking about right now are social games, and if you rig the game so that it's always in your favor, people just aren't going to want to play with you. If you're always rolling 6 on a d6, people are going to say, why do I want to play with this guy anyway?
Yeah. You know, I was going to share this later, but I'll share this now, actually, because it fits in with what we're talking about here. This is one of the next things that we're working on is called a fog of war. So it's the equivalent of putting down pieces of paper over top of a map that has more than the players have explored on it. So this is a map with, let's say, 4 players, and the axe is meant to represent some extra person who isn't actually a player, but he's along for the ride, a non-player character. And this shows where everybody is. This is Bruce Cordell is the blue person. I'm in there, sort of over to the right. And this is what we've all discovered. We found this little alcove, and there appears to be an opening here in front of Bruce. So the idea will be that we will layer canvases over top of one another with a map at the bottom. And in the simplest example, there will be one layer over top of another, just as in Photoshop. And the top will be the gray. It'll be the fog of war. And you can only see what you have already explored. So if Bruce moves down this path here, he'll be able to see, the GM will be able to reveal this corridor to him. Right? And as you travel through the game, you'll be able to view more and more. Now again, this is eminently hackable. You could go and figure out where this image resides and go and download it and see, cheat it and look ahead. But that's like being the banker in Monopoly and giving yourself interest-free loans, which I did as a child, and I regret. No, I don't regret it, but I'm ashamed.
But I do. I mean, I definitely see sort of that issue, and I do think it's pretty valid that, that I think what we are exploring here is sort of potentially something as interesting as a lot of the social gaming that's already happening, the stuff that Zynga and people like that are doing. Like those games, you're changing numbers in a database somewhere and managing your farm, and it doesn't really appeal to me at all. But I love the idea of being able to play a game of chess against another human being, or can you imagine all of the poker games that could be happening out there as people are playing, are really playing games against other human beings the way nature really intended. So I think that a lot of these issues are definitely going to come back to the foreground over time as it stops being just a bunch of individual people just getting together with their existing social connections. You can imagine open forums where people who love a certain kind of game could be dropped into a game right away. They can start playing with a DM. You can see the reputations of the DM. You can bring your characters from one game to another. I mean, the possibilities of this are endless and scale up forever,
Yeah, and
the security issues are significant and important, and I think we'll address them. But right now, adding features and working on stability, I guess, are the priorities, and we're kind of trusting people that they're not going to ruin their own experience. At some point, we'll go back and lock everything down, I'm sure, to an extent.
Sure.
Yeah, but I think it's addressing a whole paradigm that actually works so well with with what Google+ is and what the Hangouts are all about, which is, instead of, like I said, instead of updating my farm, let's get together, hang out, let's play a game, and let's have a shared environment, a space that supports that and really encourages that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The way we describe Hangout apps in general is we say Hangouts are social by default, right? You don't hang out by yourself, and hanging out with 1 or 2 people is not so interesting. But it's when you have this room of 9 other people that things get really interesting and the conversation starts flowing. And Hangout apps, by extension, are social by nature, right? By default, rather. And so games that require you to have a bunch of people hanging out and doing stuff together is the model that we want to build. So table games obviously are perfect for that, and they have a lot of high engagement, long time spent, and so this is a good model.
Yeah,
I think the security thing is a solved problem, and for you guys, building out the core features probably is the first thing.
And then the other thing is that because it's Google+, you know who you're dealing with, and there's a reputational aspect there already. It's sort of like if somebody's really, it's always funny to get hung up on security in a game that is ultimately about shared imagination.
Yeah, but for us, building the app is a game too. It's right. So we want to do it as perfectly as we possibly can, and you run into some sort of problem, and you think, awesome, a problem. right? You don't think, ah, crap, a problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, doing all of that is going to be just fun to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, every time we talk about the app, we get gamers going, oh, and can we do this? Oh, and we want tarot cards. Oh, and I want a deck.
You're thinking like, oh, you could do like line of sight on the maps, and then you could do.
Yeah.
Right, and that.
I don't think I've seen a single comment that's been, my players cheat. I want you to make sure that they don't mess with their dice rolls. It's all, you know, I want to upload this, or I want to do a video, I want to, you know, give me tokens that look like little orcs. You know,
I want to play
music in my game
through the plug-in so that everybody has a soundtrack and different.
Yep, that's actually in the roadmap.
Sure.
Yeah, and you know, and like there's the face tracking, so you can give people costumes when they show up, right? Give them a little helmet or elf ears.
Who everybody's supposed to be. You know, there's always the classic like middle school role playing where you forget that, you know, what gender your character is. keep switching back and forth. You know, it's like no, you would actually like, you know, put on the hair and makeup and everything and actually be able to do it. No, that'd be awesome.
See, that's an interesting thing. There's a real balance there because a lot of people, I can include myself among them, don't like to see a lot of visuals because I like it all to happen in my imagination. It's like watching a movie once you've read the book. You imagine what Harry Potter looks like, and you go see the movie, and you're like, oh, that's not him. And then you go back and reread the book, and you can't imagine him the way you did originally. He looks like the movie actor. Like, oh, there's a little bit of my imagination torn away.
You could definitely explore the costuming with an extension, though, that's running in parallel, you know, for the people who, you know, as...
Yeah, optional.
You know, all right, now I'm a bear.
Well, actually,
go ahead.
One of the things we're actually exploring with, besides the face tracking effects with the visuals, is like kind of augmented reality, like condition markers, so that if your character was like in a confused state or was poisoned, you would have like a floating green skull above your head or something, and you know.
You can see how many hit points you have left, and the GM at a glance can see who needs to be beaten up a little harder.
Well, but even better is that depending on how many hit points you've lost, your face gets bloodier and bloodier.
That would be awesome.
Ending with little X's over your eyes when you die.
Yeah.
Actually, we support multiple overlays, right? You can actually you could actually continue to add scar tissue to people as they get
right. But they're you can only still tie them to something being tracked, right? You can't put them static yet.
Yeah.
So if I moved my head, my HP counter would like move around in circles or something.
It'd be nice to be able to tie them too.
Right the second you can do it with the set avatar, and then just bounce that state. You know, everybody updates. You know, because the set face tracking overlay attaches it to your stream, and then whatever you do gets seen by everybody else. But set avatar actually is individual for each client. So I can like make an extension that turns you into an android, but you don't even know that happened.
I think Alan just loaded up his caption app extension, rather.
Yeah, but it's not working today.
Oh.
Well, we did at one point we're redoing it now is little tooltips over top of your icon. So when you start the game, you get your avatar appears as a small icon on the map, and you roll over, you get a little tooltip over top of it that shows some text.
I think also Moritz made a lower thirds extension that could be very useful. You know, your character's name at the bottom.
Do you guys have orientation for your characters? I realize like 4th edition D&D I think doesn't do orientation, but I'm just sort of curious.
Yeah, you can rotate. There's right-click contextual menu options on the tokens, so you can rotate them or increase or decrease the size or lock them so nobody else can move them, that kind of thing.
That's so cool.
I think we have some questions prepared, right? Yeah, we have a couple questions, although you guys answered most of them through your chatter, which is the best way to do it. So I realize you guys have been developing since about the beginning of the Hangouts apps, the Hangouts API, and it was pretty rough, especially at the beginning. Would you mind telling us about some of the interesting challenges you overcame as you were developing the Tabletop Forge?
Sure. So one is obviously the limited size of the state object. So when I first was attempting to do this, when you added a map, I was trying to figure out a way. Well, I just want to share the whole image through the state. You know, with a 100K image. Obviously, even as a data URI, that just wouldn't fit in there. So that's when I came up with the concept. Well, if it's a URL, I can just share the URL instead to the state object and have everyone add that to the DOM through that method rather than having to fit a 100K pipe, object in there every time. So that was definitely a challenge, and it's actually still a challenge because the state object doesn't refresh. I mean, it's pretty fast, but sometimes there is a little bit of a lag in there, so you have to kind of account for that sometimes.
I think I found one of my problems was the balancing the number of times I wanted to refresh from the state object. And I periodically get into these little infinite loops where I would update the state object, and the state object, because it was updated, would tell me to update again, and over and over and over, around and around again. And the problem is that I develop by myself, and then I play with others. And so you're playing in a, all of a sudden you're developing with nobody in the room, and so suddenly you put other people in the room, and they're doing all sorts of things that you couldn't possibly have debugged by yourself.
Lying, Jonathan saying that you don't hang out by yourself, except developers. I hang out by myself all the time.
That's like looking in a mirror.
Yes.
The problem with that is actually a problem that I ran into. I didn't find a really good solution to it, was that I wasn't able to reproduce in that way the live environment. My dev environment was inherently different from the live environment.
And
I'd go steal my wife's computer and turn on a video and join her to the Hangout. And as long as she wasn't using her computer, it worked fine, and just it'd be an empty room. But a bit of a hack.
And I think early on, some of the problems we had was that there wasn't a lot of control over the actual Hangout environment. So we had a lot of problems being able to get the video to show in the same kind of way that the Hangouts work. So with this, as you see, whoever's talking shows up as the big picture, and so before, you just had the thumbnail, and you had no way to control the big window. But a lot of us was nagging the API team to give us more and more control over the different elements of the interface. And now I think there's everything that we want to do is in there.
Great.
So thank you for being so receptive.
I would like to add the app to the on-air functionality. I think that would be great. I'd like to be able to play a game and have people watching the game while other players are in the game.
Yeah, I mean, this is the big idea that we've been sort of thinking about is, wouldn't it be cool to pull together a lot of the Google+ celebrities and have a big role-playing game with them all at the same time, and bring in some celebrity DMs and do that as a Hangout on Air? I think it would be really fun. But right now, there's no way that we can think of to actually drag this functionality through into Hangouts on Air.
So you can screen share on Hangouts on Air, right?
Yeah, people have been doing that.
And then you can run an app in your Hangout. So is that what you want to do, or is it different than that?
Well, the screen share isn't quite as instantly updating as as running the app native.
Well, you got to do the on air.
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking though? Is that
yeah. So I mean, for example, right now we can't actually access the app in this Hangout and actually display it out in a sort of way to the audience that's watching this Hangout.
Mm-hmm. We kind of can. So when Charles loaded it earlier, if you saw, I actually was able to make a role that showed on his screen. So we access it all locally. One person has to screen share, so you could obviously only see it from one person's view, but it does sort of work.
Right, and so you can imagine there would need to be some sort of separate version that's presented as part of the Hangout on Air, and then the various players have their own access to it in their own version of it as well. It's just like you've got one extra player that's just watching, right?
Yeah, also because of the lag, as Josh was pointing out at the beginning of this, I had to turn off my main video because resharing the video was causing lag. And you never see the face of the person who's sharing it. And we're all vain, so.
Well, yeah.
We need an additional headless view that you can, because for cases like the game, you're going to have to potentially have different visibility for
correct
on-air view versus the player views and stuff.
Well, and you can insert the video canvas into your app, so you could insert yourself back into.
Yeah, we have that there, but that's what he was talking about. He had to minimize it because once he started screen sharing, it just got really I mean, that's pretty intensive to put that video up there. So.
Yeah, having the main video in is good, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think the solutions that we've thought about is more stripping it down and having one video that that just contains the game information happening in it, and then having that act like a virtual camera that contains that information, right? And then that gets, and then whoever is the director of the show is switching back and forth as required. You know, if someone rolls a die, we'll switch back over and show the die getting rolled, and then go back to the game. So it's just it's a whole other layer of complexity. But I think it would be really interesting. I would love to play a game with Vic and, you know, Sergey and all those guys. You know, let's see their D&D
with a sword and shield too. Awesome.
Let's see. Yeah, are they really, you know, game geeks? Let's find out.
And there are lots of guys in the gaming industry that you would never meet outside of a con that you could play with, or that you could watch play. It'd be really cool to watch, you know, Will Wheaton and Monty Cook and Peter Adkison play D&D, right? So if they were going to play the game, they're going to play on a Hangout maybe, but still nobody's ever going to see it unless they save it and post it to YouTube. Really cool if those guys got together and played a game, or if there was a big game at a convention and you could just watch it live. That'd be awesome.
Well, everybody's writing comments on the post. That can feed into the DM.
Yeah.
You can incorporate some of the ideas into the story. That's awesome. Yeah, like a big hive mind. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was thinking, actually, Fraser, in that game that we're playing in Arcane Apocalypse. It was that when you open your mind to when you cast this magic spell to sort of scry to see what's going on in the world, we could just pull stuff out of the comments.
Yeah.
You could say, oh, yeah.
Just run an entire dungeon that's like all freestyle from the comments.
So yeah.
Sure.
Yeah,
That'd be awesome.
You have a shared environment of people creating things ahead of time as you go, and even the DM doesn't even know what's going to go on. They just It's like improv.
Like, oh my God, look at that.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be really fun.
Yeah, there's some skeletons coming towards you. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Why not?
Oh, all right. Next question.
Next question. You've already alluded to this a little bit, especially when you showed us the Fog of War and mentioned a couple other things you're planning to add. But where do you plan to take this game? What are some interesting things on your roadmap?
Okay, so we do want to integrate with some third-party sites using OAuth. So there's a popular campaign management site out there called Obsidian Portal that does allow OAuth. So it's kind of keep track of your notes and your character sheets and stuff like that. So basically be able to pull that information into the Hangout so that, you know, between Hangouts, you can have kind of, you know, this is what happened since last time, here's our log of our adventures, and not have to replicate all that functionality within the Hangout app itself. Charles talked about the Fog of War, so we definitely want some more advanced, mapping type of features. We have to be careful because a lot of people want things like super advanced, like line of vision and automatic calculating distances between objects. And while having a computer is great to let you do stuff, that stuff's not on the tabletop. So we have to walk a fine line that we don't turn it into a computer game and keep it, close to the actual role-playing game experience.
Yeah, and again, as I said at the beginning, that we're not developing for a game. We're developing for a whole host of games. This is like building an app for board games or card games, right? The more you make specific things that work for specific games, the less time you're spending on everybody else's game. So line of sight is very important for D&D 4, but really irrelevant for things like Ars Magic or Apocalypse World that are abstract combat away. We want to build things like a deck of cards that you can draw out of, a set of dice that you can roll, random number generators that just cover things that we have never thought of. For example, one game that I was playing, when we came to a town, Greg Christopher, who was GMing, would pick randomly 2 of the 7 deadly sins to define what kind of conflict was going on in the town. And so he's like, okay, well, I got to pick a number between 1 and 7. I said, just roll a 7-sided die. And I hadn't actually programmed a 7-sided die, but I built the regex just so that it could do any random number. So he goes, oh, okay, 2d7, boom, and it worked. And we want to have that kind of flexibility so that anybody can come in with any game that we've never seen before, that we've never played before, and it works for them.
I mean, right now, you could go and create a map that's a chessboard. You could upload a bunch of the tokens that are the pieces, and you could, almost out of the box, have a game of chess with somebody.
Yeah.
Right? with no real modifications even to the environment. I mean, it's all, as long as you have the picture of the chessboard and the right tokens for the pieces, then you got yourself a chess game.
And that's
yes, when I go to the bathroom, Charles can be, moving around, but it's all possible, right?
How did you get 4 queens? I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Well, that's the compromise between flexibility and security, and it's not necessarily a technical issue always. Some of it is just that you want to leave it open-ended, so sure, you can cheat and move your pawns back when somebody's in the bathroom, but so that's the downside. But the upside is that, yeah, you could take this RPG game and turn it into a chessboard or a checkers board, or you could play backgammon on it in theory. You could play pretty much any game you wanted, but you're not going to have the rules programmed in preventing you from cheating.
Mm-hmm.
No. So it's a compromise. I think one of the other things Josh and I were talking about is that at some point this is going to get to the level of wanting to do a Kickstarter around it and get some design people in and really just get all of the functionality that we want and organize it all and put it out to the community and see who's willing to kick in a couple bucks because we're not making any money off of this. We're building this. I certainly started building this because my Ars Magica game, which was in Fraser's living room actually, fell apart because we live in a town of 30,000 and I think there's 7 gamers and we only have 3 of them. The moment we came online, we found 20,000 other people that we could play with, and there was always somebody free. So I built this so I could continue my games, and I'm happy to share it with everybody else.
Great. So we actually have a question from the comments stream. Christian asks, are you planning to include functionality for saving logs or other assets? For example, the Google Docs or Google Drive, or possibly pulling in content from there?
Yes, so in early alpha versions of the app, we actually were saving stuff to Google App Engine in a data store and pulling that back in to, basically as you join the Hangout, you could choose a previous session and, whatever map state there was or where the tokens were, all that would kind of just get replayed and at the current state, and that's almost ready for this version. It's just that when we went through from alpha to beta, but it's still really kind of alpha, we redid the whole engine of how we stored those JSON objects, so we have to rewrite the code to sync that to App Engine, or we might do a MySQL database. It really doesn't matter on the back end, but that is coming.
I was doing mine in MySQL. There's also Obsidian Portal that Josh alluded to earlier that it really does that. It's a site where you can create a wiki for your campaign and you can make essentially a blog for your campaign. So we could be writing sessions back to that for people who use that. It's a question of finding the best way to do it. Finding a giant data store. I mean, one way that I've been considering doing it is something like Dropbox or Google Docs, where you could just go in and preload. You do all your maps and you do your tokens and your pictures and so on and so forth, and just drop them into a Dropbox. And then when you're in the game, you would have a tool window where you could just go and click, and load up your images directly from your shared folder somewhere. The best way to do that, we haven't figured out technically yet.
Yeah, I mean, when that used to exist in the functionality, it was pretty great because then we could quickly review what happened last week. Like, I don't know if you've ever played and you don't remember the names of people that you meet and things like that, that there was a certain sort of continuity that you could go back and go, who was that person that I stabbed in the back again? Oh, right, because you'll write down you'll make notes as you do it, Fraser stabs Charles in the back, D6, right?
It's basically like a searchable Twitter stream that we all contributed to.
Yeah, and hashtags and things like that. So I think that all was very cool and great to have that back.
That's part of the whole merging my work with Josh's, which is an ongoing process.
I had a question. The 1v7 is an example of something you can do in virtual space that you can't do in real life. It's a better than being there moment. Do you have do you have another one of those? Just something that happened, something that happened that's sort of unique.
Yeah, there's a game called Mouse Guard that's based on a comic book, and the role-playing game was written by Luke Cain, so it's built on his Burning Wheel system, and it uses a number, instead of having one big die, a 20-sided die or 12-sided die, you have a whole bunch of basically coin flips, two-sided dice, and then you count up the number that were successes versus the number that were failures. So it's a D2 basically. It's a coin, which is a D2, and then on the table, what you do is you normally don't carry a bunch of coins to the table. You roll D6s, and 1, 2, 3 counts as a failure, and 4, 5, 6 counts as. So it's a hack. The dice version is a hack. In Hangouts, you just roll D2s, and it works perfectly.
And you can roll arbitrary numbers. I remember with the Star Wars role-playing game, you always ended up with giant fistfuls of dice, and it would take us forever just to add them all up.
Yeah.
So that's a cool point.
Yeah, we actually do support what for those kind of systems. A lot of times you're comparing them to like a target number. So I'm rolling 10 dice, and anything bigger than a 4 it counts as a success. So our syntax does you can do like 10d6 greater than or equal to 4, and then anything that was rolled greater than 4, it highlights it and counts those successes for you automatically. So it saves you a little bit of time.
I mean, it's that same thing. Like, have you ever like played like Catan or Carcassonne or things like that, but on your iPhone or your iPad and things like that? And it's just like you can burn through games in minutes. You know, you play a game of Catan and you're done in 20 minutes, when normally a bunch of people sitting around a room, it's going to take you 5 hours to get through a game, just because all of the mechanics is all just getting done so quickly. The game is getting set up, and the dice are being rolled, and it's the same. It feels very similar to that, which is like all of that, roll the dice, oh, it fell on the table, oh, got to pick it back up again, you know, is that cocked, is it not, you know, it's all just like, boom, dice get rolled really fast. It's good. I like that part has really smoothed up the gameplay so much, and like what you were saying, you know, those games where you've just got these great big fistfuls of dice, you got to add them all up, and you got to add all those modifiers, and then, this is so much better.
Yeah, and the usability and the user interface and making sure that those things happen quickly and smoothly, that's going to be a big part of our project going forward. And I think that when we get to the Kickstarter, certainly that's going to be a big priority for me anyways. As the GM, you end up spending a lot of time uploading a new map, or where did I put that thing? Oh, I got to scale it properly. If you could do all that before the game and just dump it somewhere, and then be able to click, 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 and pull it in, push it out, and that will make the game so much easier for everybody. Fog of War, okay, I'll put my map up, but I don't have to worry that you guys are going to see things you can't see, because I'll just block it out.
And I think that's really the fundamental philosophy that's driving the whole process, right, is, as we mentioned before, which is start from maintaining that core essential game experience, that you play with your friends, that you hang out, that it's all about interacting and social, and then support and remove all of the scut work, the things you don't really enjoy doing as you play your game, so that you can get at the essential, which is the shared experience. Mm-hmm. The rules of the games often get in the way of the play, but in many cases they're necessity, and so all the things that are hard and slow and complicated and stuff, we can get that out of the way. We can just have a really fun game.
Great. Well, believe it or not, we're actually running out of time. 45 minutes flew by.
Yeah.
So does anyone have any closing comments or thoughts they'd like to add before we?
What games? What was your first game that you played?
We were just talking about this before I got started. The first role-playing game was actually the old blue Advanced D&D box set. It was the one after the 3 little books. I had that one as my first one.
That was the advanced, right? Or the expert. It was the expert set.
Like expert or something. And you started with the Keep on the Borderlands was the first one.
Yeah.
And then after that, we did a whole bunch of things. I ended up playing tons of MERP in high school, Middle Earth role playing. And then we added the spellcaster rules to it because we wanted just better spells and better critical. And then we got into Twilight 2000, a lot of like riding around in Eastern Europe on trains, shooting at bad guys. It was great. That was when I finally like had an encyclopedic knowledge of like firearms. And unfortunately, it stops in high school because I stopped playing Twilight 2000, moved on to other stuff. So I have like all weapons before like 1993. After that, it's all lost.
This is a skill I hope to reuse one day.
We finish our time machine and go back to 1993.
Yes, I'm ready for the apocalypse in 1993. Yeah, and more recently we've been playing the rebuild of Gamma World, which is fairly nuts. I mean, I remember playing the original Gamma World, and it was crazy, but it was sort of serious crazy, and the new Gamma World is just crazy. It's a lot of fun.
Jonathan?
I'm going to pass on this one.
Oh, so we got to suck you into a game then, man.
So, most of my role-playing experience has actually been in the last year working at Google.
Funny how that happens, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm also pretty casual myself, so you'll usually find me playing Carcassonne or Settlers, but occasionally, especially if I'm at like a gaming con or I'm with some friends who are more into it, I'll definitely pick up the dice, and I've played a lot of 5th edition and some 4th edition, I believe.
Actually, and the other thing, we used to play Call of Cthulhu.
Awesome.
That was how we got. That was how we dragged our girlfriends into playing role-playing.
And that's actually the game we've been thinking would be a really good kind of intro public game, because it's horror. The rules are really simple. There's a lot of stuff there that a lot of people would really enjoy, and you could genuinely freak out the players if you did it right.
It's definitely it was all about atmosphere when you play it. We turn the lights low, light some candles, and we had some friends who were pretty good at chanting in strange languages.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, doc. So we are actually completely out of time now. So we're going to call it a week. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely, and this is a totally awesome project.
Yes, we'll be following this very closely, and maybe you guys would like to join us again in the future.
Yeah, 6 months from now you'll be unrecognizable. Hopefully.
Hopefully in a good way.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks again. And
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
See everyone later.
Whenever we do this again.
Yeah, in a couple of weeks we'll be doing another session. So all you viewers, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, bye.